くんじゃねえ。おふくろんとこは帰れ。居酒屋をすっとも長くした方がよくはねえか。
Yojimbo and Sanjuro are films that came out in the early 1960s that are written and directed by Akira Kurosawa. So, Yojimbo and Sanjuro comes from no other than Perry Perez himself as his $50 picture request. And I'm actually pretty late on this review. I told him pretty much like a month ago by now that I was going to review this film, and I just haven't got around to it, even though I watched both of these films at least 3 weeks ago. And now I'm finally glad that I had the time to talk about these films, because Akira Kurosawa is a filmmaker that I feel like I haven't dived enough into quite yet. I've seen Seven Samurai, I've seen High and Low, but, you know, that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to his films. So I was really excited to finally watch Yojimbo and Sanjuro, considering that these are considered to be one of the best samurai films ever made. And just to cut right to the chase with Yojimbo, I thought it was a great film. I'm pretty sure that's not a surprise to anybody out there. But Yojimbo's definitely a film where I can totally understand the love that it gets. Because it's a film that is just so timeless in a lot of different ways, in terms of the style, in terms of the aesthetic approach, in terms of the character writing. It's a film that it doesn't matter which time period you watch this film. It's always going to be relevant. It's always going to be a great time. And you don't even have to be like a hardcore film lover to really enjoy this film. And that's one of the many aspects of this film that I really admired. And right off the bat, it's a film that you could tell deeply inspired Quentin Tarantino. I mean, both films in general, Yojimbo and Sanjuro. But, and I think I mentioned this in my Seven Samurai review, but just the way that music is used in this film, and just the way that it's used to kind of express certain character situations, certainly inspired Quentin Tarantino. Because it just has this animated and sense of grandness to it, to where you just feel like you're watching something that's epic. And it just makes it that much more entertaining and that much more fun to watch. But even besides the awesome and fun style to this film, the character writing and the dialogue, and even like the way that character themes are expressed and the way that certain character contexts are unraveled in this film, is also something that makes this film really engaging throughout your experience. Because the main samurai character, played by Toshiro Mifune, who is absolutely legendary, by the way. Like, not only is his character legendary, but him as an actor is legendary. He's an actor that just radiates charisma. And everything that I've seen him in so far, including Seven Samurai, I feel like he's somebody that's just able to make any character fun to watch, regardless if they're incredibly well written or not. And in terms of its character writing in this film, in Yojimbo, I really loved it, because his character in this film is for the longest time neutral in terms of whether or not he's a protagonist or antagonist, because for the longest time in this film, you don't really have a protagonist, because his character's shtick is basically to be an opportunist, and basically any situation where he can see himself benefiting from, he's going to jump at the chance to do. And he's not really too concerned on who's wrong and who's right. And that makes him such a badass character in this film, because not only in terms of his physical skill, in terms of the fact that he's a surgeon with a samurai sword, not only is that just incredibly kick-ass, but just like intellectually, his intellectual skill in this film, in terms of how he's able to just manipulate all these social situations, is incredibly clever, and just makes him not only physically badass, but intellectually badass. And his mindset and his approach in this film is described perfectly by no other than Mac from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Because I'm playing both sides so that I always come out on top.
And I understand that on the surface that might make it seem like he's this kind of douchey and unlikable character. And arguably, he is kind of douchey, but he's certainly likable, and the reason why it works in this film is because the sides that he's working with in this film, they're not very likable either. So, like, he's not working with a bunch of likable and innocent people throughout his entire film. He's working with a bunch of flawed and cowardly people who, would betray him the second that they get the chance. So it's really interesting to see a character that's able to just outwit both sides. But eventually, I believe in the third act of this film, his character takes a stance on something. And I love that aspect of the film because it's not that it makes it one-dimensional. I actually think it's the opposite. Because even though he's no longer somebody that is just blanketly playing both sides, it shows that he does have some sort of principle when it comes to certain things. And I like that detail of his character because pretty much the moment that he realizes that he's going to have to take a stance on this particular thing, he basically says that he hates these kinds of people in reference to the person that he's choosing to help. And I think the reason why he says that is because it forces him to no longer be that person who's overly cynical and above morals and above people. And he's now putting himself in danger and sacrificing himself for a cause that he thinks is worthy and honorable of his own sacrifice. But even beyond the character writing and the acting and just the overall style of it in terms of the way music is incorporated, even the camera choices and the aesthetic choices are really something because there's a lot of shots in this film that, again, not only look visually appealing, but they do have some sort of thematic purpose as well. And in some ways can be symbolic. For instance, there's this one scene where both sides of the town are basically like eating down each other's necks and they're preparing to fight each other, but it's like both of them are just too cowardice to make a move and make a stance. But you see the main character up on this, high pedestal as he's just calm and collected. And again, it's those types of camera choices in this film that kind of emphasize character theme. And that's something that I feel like is definitely worth praising in this film. It's something that I admired while I was watching it. One thing that I will say about Yojimbo, though, is that I feel like it does kind of hit a point in the second act where I feel like there's like a stretch of 15 or 20 minutes where I really wasn't all that invested into what was happening in the story. And that's quite unfortunate because I feel like I was checked out for a bit too long until things actually started getting engaging and interesting again. But that's one thing that I noticed about the film, and that's really the only main issue I do have with the film is that I feel like you could probably trim 20 minutes or so of this film and got more of it just a complete, concise piece of filmmaking that I personally don't think would drag at all. So I'm going to give Yojimbo a solid 8 out of 10. Okay, now on to Sanjuro. And I apologize if I don't talk as extensively on Sanjuro as I did with Yojimbo, because a lot of what I really liked about Sanjuro is also present in Yojimbo. And obviously that has to do with the character writing and the acting and the camera work. I feel like all that stuff is all present in its sequel, Sanjuro, which, by the way, yes, I forgot to mention, is a direct sequel to Yojimbo, starring the one and only Toshiro Mifune. But the ultimate difference between Yojimbo and Sanjuro is that, as I mentioned for a long period of time in Yojimbo, is that you really don't have that element of mystery when it comes to the morals of the main character. And, he's not playing both sides the entire film like he was in Yojimbo. He very early on makes a stance, and there's essentially no mystery in terms of whose side he's going to be protecting and fighting for. And in a way, that takes away a little bit of the charm, but at the same time, it's also just really fun to see this main character just one after the other outwitting the other side in all these different clever ways. I mean, this guy is a master manipulator, and it's just really entertaining to see an entire film where his character is just coming up with all these different schemes to trick and dupe the other side in order to protect the people that he's trying to save and hopefully eventually come out on top is just, it's just really entertaining stuff. And it just makes it to where, just by the nature of the film, you're going to have so many different memorable scenes, and arguably maybe a little bit more memorable scenes than Yojimbo. Because Yojimbo actually, I feel like, takes its time more. It is a longer film. I believe it's 25 minutes longer, or around that length. And Sanjuro just kind of gets right to the point, and there's not much filler or parts in between that, you know, aren't the most exciting, but it's still present in this film. And the only areas where that's present, I believe, comes like at the end of the first act, going into the second act, where you have the people that he's protecting just kind of going back and forth with their dialogue, explaining certain situations, explaining who certain characters are, you know, trying to come up with different schemes that can get them ahead. And sometimes I just feel like it's a little bit too much talking, a bit too talkative, and it's not that interesting what's being said. So again, I feel like maybe that kind of stuff just could have been dialed back a little bit. But I loved the third act and the ending to this film, just in terms of the main conflict that the main character gets himself into, and what him and his people kind of have to think about in order to get himself out of it. And also just the actual ending scene itself is just so much fun. And again, reminds me a lot of something that Quentin Tarantino would make. Just in terms of the way violence is executed in this film is just silly and fun. And I really enjoyed it. It reminded me something like Kill Bill or something. But yeah, I still really like this film quite a bit. A lot of what was present in Yojimbo that I really liked is also present in the sequel. Besides the fact that, you know, his character isn't the most morally ambiguous in the sequel. But other than that, it's still a worthy sequel that I would definitely recommend, even though I would say I enjoyed Yojimbo a tad bit more. So I'm going to give Sanjuro a soft 8 out of 10. I guess the next Akira Kurosawa film that I'm going to try to watch and put on a poll sometime soon is Ran, because I just hear so many great things about that film. I put it on a poll before, didn't win, got close, but I'm going to give it another shot and see if it wins. Either way, that's all I got to say about Yojimbo and Sanjuro. If you really enjoy what I had to say about the film, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.